Since 1961, humans have chased the thrill of adventuring into the last frontier. Over the years, countries have spent hundreds of billions of dollars sending their astronauts into space, each time trying to push the envelope on a new breakthrough. Now, we've reached yet another milestone: private space travel. Billionaires Richard Branson and Jeff Bezos both successfully reached space last month and brought along a few lucky passengers. With this news, many people are asking, why now? Why would two men who have everything take the risk?
My feeling is that billionaires or not, they are responding to the same sort of transcendent wonder we all apply to space. I mean, space is something that gives us the opportunity to go someplace larger, see something grander than we possibly can see on Earth. We have all always been a little bit drunk on space.
That's Jeffrey Kluger, the editor-at-large at Time magazine and a journalist who's been covering space exploration for more than 4 decades. Although there's been some controversy around Branson and Bezos creating their own space companies in order to take a private flight, he understands their ambition.
Billionaires are in a position to fly themselves to suborbital space and then fly others. I think that whatever else we may say about billionaires, they're not always lovable, they're not always cuddly, but whatever else we may say about them, I think they're responding to something very deep and primal that moves us all. So it's hard for me to be churlish about their work and their enterprises, and I just feel generally positive about what it is they're doing.
One reason Kluger believes this new idea of space tourism is exciting is because it opens up the door to people who otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity. This includes professionals in the space industry, politicians, and scientists. As more rockets are built, more and more astronauts and civilians can reach out for the void of space.
In the 60 years since Yuri Gagarin became the first human being in space, fewer than 600 people have ever traveled to space. So the idea that this number could explode exponentially if Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic begin carrying tourists regularly democratizes space. It opens up space. Some people, cynics, might argue it cheapens space. It makes it a less special thing. But air travel was once something for the elite. Traveling across oceans was once something for the elite. And then it became something for the masses.
Who knows? One day the average Joe could hop on a rocket, travel to space, and be back on Earth in time for dinner. The many possibilities are exciting, but it's important to remember that it's still a risky endeavor. Traveling outside Earth's atmosphere is a vastly different environment than most are used to.
Now, space travel will always be a little bit more difficult for anyone to undertake. The physics are still pretty punishing. You have to be able to tolerate 3 or 4 or more Gs. You have to be able, if you're going into orbit, to accelerate to 17,500 miles per hour. So you're certainly not going to be able to send anyone at all on a space flight in the same way you can send virtually anyone at all on an airline flight. But I think the opening up of space is, in the long run, a good thing, making this terra incognita that so few people have ever explored something that's available to the vast rest of us.
Blasting upwards into space is an experience like no other. On top of the physical strains, there's also the risk of a major malfunction of the spacecraft. The field of private space travel brings into question the vetting process and safety checks for each flight. What's the real risk of something going wrong? Will there one day be a life insurance policy that covers space travel?
Do I worry about accidents? Yes, I worry about accidents. Every time you fly in space, there's a risk of an accident. The more times these spacecraft take off, the more every single flight is an opportunity for an accident. It's impossible to say unless you're actually inside Blue Origin and inside Virgin Galactic if the vetting processes are as exhaustive as they are for NASA. But do I worry about accidents? Yes, I worry about accidents. I think if people are mindful of the risks, and there are risks associated with this, I think people are physically up to it and mentally and emotionally up are, I don't see anything wrong with it.
Despite the calculated risks, Bezos and Branson took flight and seemed to enjoy the ride. They both technically reached space, but there are different definitions of what the boundary of space is. The most common definition is called the von Karman line, which lies about 62 miles above the Earth's surface. Bezos reached this line while Branson's flight rocketed up 53 miles before descending back down. Kluger says the minimal difference in height doesn't change the end experience for passengers.
Either way, you are traveling to a place that's effectively above the atmosphere, where the sky is black, where the earth below you recedes in a way that we never see it recede when we're in a simple airplane. You experience weightlessness, you experience that you have the opportunity for sightseeing. So in the long run, that 12-mile difference between 50 miles and 62 miles just isn't that big a difference at all.
So, are you sold on space travel yet? Well, the main question is, do you have the funds? One ticket on Branson's Virgin Galactic flight will set you back $250,000. This includes the 1-hour flight, training, and a spacesuit. There are only 6 seats available per flight, and 600 people have already booked a spot. Kluger says the prices are sky high right now, but he predicts that one day, within our lifetime, heading into space will be more attainable.
Ultimately, economies of scale, as more people fly these missions, as more spacecraft are built, the price will come down. It still will be unlikely ever to be the equivalent of a $200 seat flying between New York and Baltimore, but the prices are likely to come down.
The future of space tourism relies on the success of upcoming flights over the next few years. As demand soars, more spacecrafts will likely be built, propelling more civilians into space.
I certainly think the prices will go down in our lifetimes, but again, whether they will go down to the level of ordinary airline prices is another question entirely, and that's very hard to say.
The future of civilian space travel is an exciting field to follow. Who knows how the industry will evolve, even within the next 5 or 10 years? To learn more about this topic and our guest, Jeffrey Kluger, visit viewpointsradio.org. Kluger's first space novel, Holdout, is available for purchase online and in bookstores. For more behind the scenes, search Viewpoints Radio on Twitter and Facebook. This segment was written by Bridget Killian and Amira Zaveri. Our executive producer is Amira Zaveri. I'm Gary Price.
Cardiovascular or CV disease is the #1 killer of adults in the U.S., and millions of people trying to reduce their risk of a heart attack or stroke may unknowingly be taking medications that are not proven nor FDA approved to reduce cardiovascular risk. Let's hear from cardiologist Dr. John Osborne.
Many people are unaware that after a failed outcome study, the FDA revoked the approval of fenofibrates when added to statins, as the risk outweighed the benefits to heart health. It's important to remember that statins, along with diet and exercise, can lower cardiovascular risk by about 25 to 35%, but persistent cardiovascular risk, which can lead to a life-threatening event, may remain. I would tell anyone still being prescribed fenofibrates, such as Tricor and Trilipix, with a statin, to talk to their doctor about FDA-approved therapies for cardiovascular risk reduction.
To learn more and get clear on the facts, visit itscleartomenow.com. Again, that's itscleartomenow.com.
The number of people with dementia worldwide will nearly triple by the year 2050 to more than 150 million. The new data presented at the Alzheimer's Association International Conference 2021 shows fastest dementia growth in Africa and the Middle East. Dr. Maria Carrillo is Chief Science Officer at the Alzheimer's Association.
Positive trends in education levels are helping to dampen the increase in dementia, but total numbers are still going up because of the aging of the population, as well as the influence of more obesity, diabetes, and sedentary lifestyles that are all risk factors for dementia.
Another study reported at the conference finds wide differences in the Alzheimer's mortality burden in the United States. In the rural South, the Alzheimer's death rate is 3 times higher than the Mid-Atlantic region. Researchers say this could be the result of health disparities, including differing access to primary care and other health services. Find out more at alz.org.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Viewpoints is a production of Mediatrax Communications. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about upcoming shows. And find a library of past programs on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and more information about our guests at viewpointsradio.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Viewpoints.
Coming up on Viewpoints.
I had to learn to do that for myself, too, to give myself some grace and flexibility. I'm normally very hard on myself as an educator.
The lessons learned as students and teachers head back into the classrooms once again. Then,
it's a spectrum like anything. I mean, people try to differentiate low carb and keto, and they're really sort of the same. It depends on how low you keep your carbs and whether you're in ketosis or not.
The conversation around keto. I'm Marty Peterson.
and I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.